This is just great. And I want to bring in Vaughn and Michael and Victoria Francesco Soto as I could. Let's stay with this because, Michael, this is such a uniquely American thing.
Yeah.
Not only is Thanksgiving uniquely American, right? But then the President of the United States of America pardoning two birds, at the beginning of the week of Thanksgiving. It's such a uniquely American phenomenon. I mean, how the rest of the world just looks at this and says, that's the United States of America. Only they can do that.
And they still want to come here to be a part of it. And that, yes, it's a crazy, wacky tradition that actually is not that old, as the president noted, and as you noted earlier. I mean, it's interesting that, in fact, Ben Franklin had such an affinity for the turkey, he offered the turkey instead of the bald eagle as our national bird. And until someone pointed out to him, well, when it rains, they drown themselves by looking up at the rain. But it's kind of a quirky thing, and it really speaks to the still kind of quirky nature of the American experience.
I agree, and we're going to get into the whole reality of the American experience of what we can expect going forward after the 20th of January. But just to wrap it up, and Victoria, it's the fact that Thanksgiving is a North American, it's an American tradition, which is such a beautiful tradition that many people throughout the world have actually also assumed in different ways. The Dia de Acción de Gracias has become such an American thing. It's unique and it's really beautiful. It really is.
And I think, Jose, especially in times like these, where we have been seeing our nation divided, we see hyperpolarization. Thanksgiving is one of those moments when you come together, right? The conversation at the Thanksgiving table may be extremely heated at times, but at the end of the day, you're coming together. And I think it's these spaces that we recognize of our common humanity, that we're coming together to discuss, to see each other as who we are, which I think is so important. It's such a beautiful thing about our American tradition.
Yeah, and, Michael, talking about now the post-Thanksgiving, but over the weekend, and Vaughn was talking about this flurry of choices that President-elect Trump, had over the weekend. The New York Times describes Trump's cabinet as many ideologies behind the veil of America first. And it goes on to say, quote, one faction of prospective nominees appears focused on revenge, another on calming markets, a third on relentlessly, perhaps hopelessly cutting people and budgets. What stands out to you about this?
I've labeled it the menagerie of misfits, because they are all cobbled together, but they don't connect. They don't fit, as the New York Times noted. Everyone has, there's already reporting about the various silos that have emerged, the loud shouting conversations that have been occurring within the transition team. This is the kind of chaos that Donald Trump likes around him. We've known for a very, very long time that his business orientation is to see who's going to fight over him the most, who's going to be the most ideologically appealing to him, connected to him, who's going to make the loudest noise on his behalf. We saw in the first administration, Reince Priebus at the cabinet meeting, basically, putting forth the supplication to, Mr. President, we are so proud that you picked us. Oh my gosh, we're so honored, right? This is not a team of individuals who are going to be as cabinet secretaries should be, advisors to the president at the same time that they are pushing forward policies that benefit the American people that are oriented around the president's agenda. So what is that agenda? It's retribution. It's going back after your political opponents. It's relitigating the 2020 election. All of these folks are there to do that level of bidding. So, I know people want to write the story that somehow this is going to be different. Please take your head out of the sand or any other place you may have it and put it in the reality of what we already know about these selected choices from someone like Sebastian Gorka, dealing with national security and dealing with the complexity of those issues. I mean, come on, it's not real.
Yeah, and yet, Victoria, new polling shows that almost 6 in 10 Americans say they approve of Trump's handling of his transition. What does that tell you?
So this is the eagerness of not seeing the usual suspects, because for the last couple of decades, Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, you usually saw some folks carrying over from the period before, right? So even in Trump's first administration, he pulled folks from the Bush era, Bush 1 and Bush 2, from other areas, folks from the Washington establishment. And so this is really his call to say, you know what, we're starting from scratch. He said this before, let's drain the swamp. So that is, I think, the eagerness that folks are seeing and why we're seeing those poll numbers, that it's new faces. Now, whether this is going to work, whether this complete freshness and lack of experience or lack of know-how is going to bring about the results that the American public wants, that's a different question. But that campaign promise that has been made of this is a restart, Washington is broken, so we're just going to clean house. And look at those nominees. He is cleaning house. These are not your usual suspects.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, this comes as we look ahead at the Senate confirmation process of some of Trump's more controversial White House picks. Here's what we heard from Republican Senator James Lankford about Tulsi Gabbard's bid for the Director of National Intelligence. Listen to this.
Does anything about her concern you?
Well, we'll have lots of questions. She met with Bashir Assad. We'll want to know what the purpose was and what the direction for that was. As a member of Congress, we'll want to get a chance to talk about past comments that she's made and get them into full context. So sure, there's comments that are floating out there, but we want to be able to know the rest of the story.
Michael, do you think that Gabbard's Senate confirmation is going to be difficult?
It should be. It should be very difficult. When you have members of the Intelligence Committee community, openly stating their concerns about having someone with her background and her own words, as Director of National Intelligence, that is it is the gathering point of all the intelligence across the network of intelligence communities that we have. That's, she's the one who's preparing the president's daily briefing. She's the one who's filtering through and leveling up not the information that the president wants to hear, but the information he needs to hear. I don't trust her. I don't know why anybody else would. I mean, her own words betray the fact that she should not be in this position, but here she is. And so I'm hoping, I'm sure, as Vaughn can tell you from his own conversations and reporting, that, Senator Lankford and others are there. That's not just a one-off. There are genuine concerns about where she will come down in her responsibilities. And giving her access to that kind of information, what becomes of that? And that's not just true about her, but other picks that the president has made that raises concerns in both domestic and national security spaces.
And so, Vaughn, do you think that anyone in Trump transition world does have those concerns? Maybe not about the candidates as much as about getting them confirmed.
They absolutely should. Number one, Matt Gaetz was rejected within 8 days, effectively, because they weren't able to cobble together enough Republican support from the outset. And if you are looking at the likes of Tulsi Gabbard, I think it's a question of, will you get 4 Republicans that were to reject her? And when you're looking at somebody like Mitch McConnell, who is retiring 2 years from now, there is a moment here where he is not going to be hamstrung by understanding that he's no longer going to be the Senate Majority Leader. And if you're looking at the fate of Ukraine, additional supplemental aid from the U.S., in a reality that Donald Trump, within the next 2 months, may indicate his intention to cut off supplemental funding, that could very well lead to questions around Tulsi Gabbard, who is somebody who, over the course of the last 2.5 years of this war, propagated formulated the idea that if the U.S. and NATO alliance had not moved defense resources near the Russian border, then, well, that was what caused Russia to ultimately invade Ukraine, which, of course, really puts the onus on NATO and the U.S. and Ukraine as opposed to the onus on Russia. And I think that is where a lot of the concerns will be increased, because it's not just about the immediacy about her role as Director of National Intelligence, but it is around the entire Trump administration's posture and its foreign policy positions toward that region going forward beyond the initial months of 2025.